Okay, I'm still here with my water bottle, so refreshed. We've talked about the college essay do's. Now we're going to take a look at the don'ts. And as I mentioned in the previous video, this very well might sound a little repetitive. Part of that is on purpose to really kind of reaffirm and emphasize things that you should and should not do when it comes to your college essay. Keep in mind that certainly you still do want to have a personal and kind of unique spin on the essay by going over the do's and do nots. I'm not trying to make everyone write the same formulaic response because that's something that simply cannot be done. But I do want you to take some time to consider what's going to work best for you. This is a pretty big shift when it comes to writing. You know, you're going from analysis, expository, argument, persuasion to a narrative. You're now writing about yourself. In some cases, you might feel a little weird using words like I, me, my, which are perfectly acceptable because you are writing about your own experiences. So some of those rules that we kind of talk about when it comes to essay writing, those are now going to be broken, and that's okay. You've already done your Invisible Man essay at this point. You do have an AP exam essay that's coming up. But that's the only other kind of traditional writing assignment, that you're most likely really going to be taking a look at. So, you're allowed to kind of start to break away from some of the things that we were doing because the objective, the purpose here is very different from what you were doing, all throughout the course of the school year with those other writing assignments. All right, so, yep, okay, make sure we're on the right slide. Talked about make sure that you're focused, that you're being specific, that you're providing details about yourself, earlier in the previous video. What you don't want to turn into is you writing an essay about this is what I think they would like to hear. So you're really then for taking the emphasis away from yourself and you're placing it onto some kind of pre-packaged, essay composition. You don't want that to happen. So they're going to read plenty of essays about how this person just cannot wait to step onto campus in Ann Arbor and go to the University of Michigan. It's always been a dream to be able to wear the maize and blue, and therefore, this would be a great opportunity. We don't want Brady talking about how he has always dreamed of going to State College to attend the Pennsylvania State University. They've already heard those kinds of things over and over again. So make sure you are writing about yourself. You're not writing about the charms of their university. You're not writing, and this might not be something really in today's world that's going to get mentioned quite as much, but the evils of terrorism, the personal commitment involved in being a doctor, that you're someone who survived the coronavirus. These are things that they certainly are going to read plenty about. You want to bring something new to the table, and they want you to bring something new to the table. I can speak from experience. I don't like reading boring essays. I don't like reading essays where I know what the next line is going to be. I want to read something that's going to kind of surprise me a little bit or is at least going to make me kind of pause and think in a positive way, and that's what you want to kind of bring to the table. So avoid going overboard with flattery. You don't have to tell them how wonderful they are. They probably already think that they're pretty wonderful. If the person reading this is a grad student, they probably think it's a pretty good place because they're putting down a fair amount of money to be going to school there, so you don't have to worry about that stuff. The big thing is be sincere, be who you are, and from a language standpoint, that can make this essay a little bit more informal. It's still you as an adult writing to another adult, so keep that in mind, and we'll get into that. This is not a text message or an email. You don't want to be slangy and overly colloquial, but you do want to have your own voice so that by reading your writing, they get a better sense of who you are as an individual. So they're not looking for a new way to view the world. They are looking, though, for a new way to view you, the applicant, that is going to be separate and distinct from a lot of those other applicants that they've already taken a look at so far as their essays. So they're not worried about what you have to say about their college. They're worried about what you have to say about yourself. And as we already said, don't visualize that admissions advisor or admissions officer as being one of the old stuffy professors, in the bow tie and cardigan or the tweed jacket. As we said, this is probably going to be someone 22, 23, 24, closer to you in age than they would be to me, unfortunately. But it's more likely going to be someone that could relate to the thought processes that you're having as a high school junior or senior, some of the concerns that you're having about entering the adult world, some of the challenges that you have faced based on your generation, your age. It's someone who can relate to that because, again, it's most likely someone in their early 20s. This is big because sometimes we don't necessarily maybe realize that we're doing this. Don't be cynical. Don't be condescending. And it's not that I feel that you're going to start using vulgar language or call someone out, on the admissions committee. But certainly the big thing is you want to avoid those sweeping generalizations, such as all Americans are conforming cowards, or I study much more than the majority of my peers. That very well may be true, but avoid making those condescending comments where you are elevating yourself by putting others down. Focus on what is good about you, not what are weaknesses about other people. If you start to write something and you go, I wonder if this is offensive, it probably is. Highlight it, delete, start over, think of another way of wording it. You want to stay away from being critical of everyone else just as a way to kind of boost yourself up. I'll get text reminds and things from people from time to time for assignments. Is it okay if I write this? If you feel like you have to ask me if it's okay to write this, it's probably not okay to write it for that college admissions officer, individual, committee member to be reading. All right. So if there's any doubt in your mind, you probably want to take it out. Certainly, if you still write it, I'll let you know about it and tell you that, hey, this would be something to change, but you want to do your best to avoid being offensive, whether that be through language, stereotypes, or just kind of sweeping generalizations that people can tend to make. Don't write a resume for this assignment. You already did write a resume or will write a resume by the in the future, but by the time you write this essay, you will have already written one. So they know what your GPA is. They know what your SAT scores are. They know which AP exams that you took and what activities you're involved in. Since they already know that stuff about it, you don't need to tell them all of it. So, you writing during my junior year, I played first singles on the tennis team, served on the student council, maintained a B+ average, traveled to France, and worked at a cheese factory. They already know all those things by taking a look at your application. Now, that's not to say that you can't take one of those things and go into more detail about it. So what is it about you being on the tennis team or being on student council or working in that cheese factory that is going to provide some insight about you that otherwise is not communicated through that application, through the transcript, through those letters of recommendation? If you have letters of recommendation coming from your tennis coach about your leadership qualities, and you already have on your resume, on your application, that you were captain of the tennis team, then you writing about those leadership qualities as being captain of the tennis team might not be the best choice because they already know all of those things. So it's not to say that these topics would not be off limits, but just make sure you're conveying something about those topics should you choose it, if it's already on the resume, on your application, mentioned in a letter of recommendation from someone else. In the do's, talked about make sure you pick some kind of focused aspect that you're going to write about. And so we said, don't, basically write an autobiography or tell the story of your life. Well, we're going to say it again, don't tell the story of your life. So, as mentioned, best essays, the memorable, the unusual ones, they're very focused. So this is not the story of your life, but it's a small glimpse, it's a sliver, it's a snippet of some kind of aspect that is going to offer an explanation as to how this example, how this moment is rich with meaning and it's alive with that imagery and explanation and details and all those wonderful things. So essays about your family, your trip to France, your extracurricular activities, they can be effective so long as they're focused and specific. So you're not going to necessarily write something about your whole entire family, but maybe there was a memory or a moment from a Christmas Eve Mass or a Yom Kippur service that you want to go into detail about. You're not going to get into that whole trip to France, but something about having that meal of boiled tongue, was you going outside of your comfort zone. Your extracurricular activities as a whole you can't cover, but maybe there's something that happened that one day that you were scooping chocolate raspberry truffle at Brewster's, and then you have to go into detail about it. So it's a little snippet of a much larger memory experience event that you are going to write about. You can't cover all those details in 650 words. You have to just make sure you cover the ones that are most important for you. As we said, words are at a premium. So don't use 50 words when 5 will do. Eliminate unnecessary words. If you wrote "in society today," consider changing that to simply "now." You're going from 3 words down to 1. Short sentences can be more forceful, and they can certainly be more direct, and they can help emphasize some things. So if there's a point that you're really trying to emphasize to the reader, you're better off writing more, not necessarily a telegraphic sentence of 5 words or fewer all the time, but you're probably better off writing a simple sentence than a simple or excuse me, than a compound or a complex type sentence. So, over the years, it has been pointed out to me by my parents, friends, and teachers, and I have even noticed this about myself as well, that I am not the neatest person in the world. Way too long for something that simply could just be, I'm messy, I am a slob, I'm not neat. Those would all be much better examples. I'm a slob, 3 words. Yes, I know one's a contraction. That's okay. And contractions can be ways to kind of help cut down on those words. You can use it for your college essay, but it's a little bit more rich with word choice. Slob compared to not neat or messy or disorganized or cluttered. I get a better sense as to who you are. Now, that's certainly not a great thing to communicate about yourself, but there might be some kind of obstacle here that you're going to be looking at. Or even though you have some of these less than desirable qualities, there's some other aspects about you that you're going to be able to now convey and communicate through your college essay. Mentioned in a previous video, avoid cliches. You want to get into specifics, okay? So if you have any of these in your essay, or all of them, hopefully not, make sure you do make sure you do take them out. So if you're going into computers or engineering and you want to be on the cutting edge or the forefront of technology, that's going to be a cliche. I learned my lesson. I always learn from my mistakes. I know my dreams will come true. I too can make a difference. Nursing is my passion. I no longer take my loved ones, or Mr. Kane, for granted. These lessons are useful both on and off the field, or in and out of the classroom. Could be a substitution that's also a cliche. I realize the value of hard work and dedication and perseverance. CHS chemistry was the greatest lesson of them all when it came to my first failure on a PIT test. I know what it is to triumph over adversity by surviving the coronavirus. French or CHS German opened my eyes to a whole new world. These phrases become very cliche. It's not to say that those experiences still cannot be written about. Maybe CHS Chem in 10th grade, when you took that first PIT test, was a failure or an obstacle, a challenge that you had to overcome and kind of change the way that you were as a student. Maybe it was one of your greatest successes. That's not to say you can't write about it, but you certainly want to avoid the kind of cliche, where, now I realize the value of hard work and perseverance, or I learned from my mistakes and now I study all the time. So stay away from those kinds of cliches. Oops, excuse me. So here's more of where they can kind of start to happen, naturally, I think, within writing. Even if a person is truly trying to avoid cliches, sometimes they can still kind of sneak in there. So if you're writing about track or cross country, as I finished the race, I realized I had learned the value of hard work and appreciated the fact that I could accomplish anything if I set my mind to it. It might be a nice example that you're using, but the significance, the importance of that example is becoming very cliche in use. Working in this atmosphere made me appreciate the value of diversity. Again, this could be good to write about, but rather than the value of diversity, get into those details that really ended up making you appreciate this working atmosphere or this program that you were working with, rather than just going with that kind of blanket general statement. So take a moment, look over these. This might be a page even to kind of freeze frame, take a screenshot of, so that you see that you don't tend to overuse these kind of phrases over and over and over again. Remember, as I have emphasized down at the bottom of the page, it is not about telling them what you've done, but it's about showing them who you are and really who you hope to be, and how maybe even you plan on expanding upon these talents and these possibilities in college. This is where you're kind of selling yourself as to how you are going to be a good, important, significant component to the successes of that college university that you're ultimately applying to. So again, these cliches, make sure you do avoid them as much as possible. And certainly, as you're peer reviewing or peer editing, someone else's essay or just kind of helping out a friend, if you come across any kind of phrase, doesn't have to be the ones that are on here that you think are still kind of a general blanket statement, too a little too cliche, make sure you highlight that for them and make them aware of it. This is probably more for an attention grabber. Don't use a quote for a quote's sake. There used to be a prompt that the Common App did where it was you could take a famous quote or song lyric from someone and write about how that has become significant and meaningful for you. And maybe that is a prompt that you want to take a look at as, if there's something like that really resonates with you, and that could become prompt number 7. But you want to make sure that you end up not writing about that person, whether it's a celebrity or someone else within your family, a coach or whatnot. You want to make sure you don't just simply start writing about that person and it takes away from you. So a lot of people think that they can make their essays weightier by putting in, a well-articulated, high-minded quote at the beginning. But again, that admissions officer isn't worried about Ben Franklin or John Lennon or me or anyone else when it comes to getting accepted into that college or university. They're worried about you. So unless you're going to use that quotation or that lyric as the basis of your essay on the whole, it's probably best to stick with your own words. Plus, you're limited, as we've said many times, to 650 words. You may as well make those 650 words your own as opposed to being limited to 625 because you take a lengthy lyric from the Beatles or someone else. So make sure you maximize your words, make all of them count. This is similar to kind of talking about cliches, but avoid those prepackaged, predictable kind of generic statements. I chose College X, I chose Allegheny, I chose Grove City because Grove City is committed to learning and I want to learn. Learning is important. Number one, you got begging the question, circular reasoning going on, but you also have a whole lot of nothing so far as what does this showcase about you. And this is the way that sometimes people will kind of end their essays, close their essays when they don't know what else they should state or say. Well, don't do this. Take that out. If you end up being at 630 words, oh well. But really make sure that you are closing, emphasizing with something that is going to reinforce who you are, extend the argument, stay away from the kind of flattery that would be going on with a phrase such as this. As I mentioned, even though it might be a little bit more informal than what would be going on with a typical, AP English language composition essay, make sure you are using your own voice. So don't thesaurus your essay. Don't always do like I think it's Shift F7, or if you right click on a word where the thesaurus will kind of show up. Admissions officers can tell when a high school student is no longer using his or her own vocabulary and they're really relying on some kind of synonym that's coming in there. So make sure you're using your own words. Big words, especially when they end up being misused, detract from the overall essay and really can distract the reader from what he or she should be getting, and it makes the essay sound pretty contrived. So you want to make sure that you are not using necessarily the biggest word or the longest word, but you're going with the best word. So powerful ideas can be expressed in simple, elegant prose. All of you are naturally gifted writers, talented writers, whether you think you are or not. So you're probably better off just going with your natural overall writing style. It's gotten you this far. There's no reason to change it at this point. Now, certainly you want to make sure you fix any spelling mistakes or grammatical mistakes, but don't feel like you have to change your voice, your style to fit into this essay, because then they're not getting that representation of who you are. Essay might be a little bit more informal, but that doesn't mean it has to be completely informal. So you are still writing an essay. It is not an email. This isn't a person-to-person FaceTime, Zoom, Skype kind of type of conversation. So still make sure you are writing an essay. Slang terms, excessively casual tone should be eliminated. By no means should you start going with abbreviations or emojis, although who knows, maybe in 15 years that'll be the way we write everything. But make sure you are still writing this with, that they can tell that you are an adult, that you are a aspiring professional, that you are taking this essay seriously, and that you're looking at it as being an opportunity to showcase something about yourself. You're not simply trying to write this in 15 minutes and get it over with as an assignment. I'd say words such as, very, a lot, cool, awesome, nice, things like that, they're not necessarily cliche, but they're certainly over generic. So, you want to be a little bit more precise in your word choice, and that's something that we've really tried to emphasize throughout the year. by no means plagiarize. Certainly, they're going to recognize it. They know what is out there with it. Don't plagiarize for me for the assignment. And I wish these things weren't true, but I've had plagiarized college essays before that get submitted, and sometimes they're talking about the value of hard work and honesty and whatnot, and then you have the irony of that kind of being plagiarized. So certainly avoid it. Don't buy something off the internet or copy and paste some kind of template. Admission people can tell. They've read enough of these things. They know what is genuine and what is not. And if there's an essay that they really don't think is um, original and valid and a reflection of who you are, they're just going to go DDI on it, meaning daddy did it. They're not going to call you up and go, Mr. Kane, we think you plagiarized the essay. That's just going to go into the pile of we're not going to admit under any circumstances. They don't have to explain to you why you were not admitted to a school. And there's also certainly a network of schools out there. So if it becomes known that this person has submitted a plagiarized essay, keep in mind if it's on the Common App, it's going out to a myriad of schools. That really is going to kind of shoot yourself in the foot. So avoid that at all costs. And along the same lines, well, maybe not plagiarism in the classic sense, don't use the same answer for two different questions. Don't recycle those essays because that's going to make it come across that you are quite lazy. And schools that have similar essays that are not Common App essays, but schools that have their own unique essays, but they know they're similar, they understand which essays are going to be similar. So Northwestern, Duke have similar prompts, but a Duke person can tell if you're not answering it and you're writing that Northwestern essay. Or the Northwestern person can tell if you're not answering their question and you're submitting a Duke essay. So make sure that you are giving each school the necessary time devotion that is needed. And if you do mention a school, make sure you're writing to the correct school when you are using that. So I can't wait to wear a Harvard Crimson sweatshirt isn't the type of essay that someone at UMass is going to want to come across. As we said, also, when it comes to word choice, you want to use the correct words. You don't want to, kind of over thesaurus your language, but do look over for typos, spelling, grammatical errors, because that certainly can be distracting, and it can be a little bit of alarm that this is kind of carelessness. Doesn't mean it's just bad writing all the time, but the extra attention to detail was not really taken into account before that essay was submitted. So please make sure you look over those essays before you end up submitting them. And don't rely on computer spell check, because certainly you might have something spelled correctly, but if it's being used improperly, it might not always pick up on those things. All right. Quiz, I'm not going to worry about those things. So basically, we've kind of gone through the do's, and now we've gone through the don'ts. Really, the big thing is take your time. Give it some serious thought. I don't want you to think of this as just some kind of fluff assignment. It's nice to be doing a writing assignment that's different from those analytical things that we've been doing all year long, but this is still an important component to a pretty big process that you're going through with the college application. So take your time, give it some thought. Don't rush it, but don't wait until the last minute. Don't wait until the day that this is going to be due in order to begin working on the essay. Kind of start bouncing some ideas, have some conversations, maybe with friends, family, as to what is it that you really kind of think about me as an individual, that a college or university, a person should know. What are some of my best qualities? And then you try to write about experiences that really kind of showcase those qualities and when they came about. I'm looking forward to reading the college essays. It's really one of my favorite essay assignments to take a look at, because at this point in the year, we tend to know each other fairly well, but there's still some surprises and some interesting stories that I get to learn about you folks as students. So it's usually a pleasure for me to read those. So I look forward to it. Certainly let me know if you have any questions, but we're going to kind of get started here with doing our college university research. We'll build this up to the resume, and then we'll get to the point where we're going to be ready to work on our college essay. All right. So I hope everyone has a good one. Take care. And as always, let me know if you have any questions. Bye-bye.